Welcome to City Versus Presents A Beautiful Bond, a jazz poetry performance celebrating Black and Latinx solidarity. My name is Christian McBride, and I'm NJPAC's jazz advisor. Since 2019, myself, NJPAC, and Rutgers University Newark have been working on a one-of-a-kind program called City Versus, which offers a wide range of complementary programs that celebrate and expand on the rich historical connection between jazz and poetry. One of the ways we do this is by creating new opportunities for the public to engage with jazz poetry, which is what this program you're watching right now is all about. Tonight, we honor two historic bonds, the one between poetry and jazz, and the one between Black and Latinx people. But I'm not doing this on my own. Joining me tonight is my fellow curator and poet, the great Vincent Toro. How you doing, Vincent?
I'm doing all right. It's just such an honor to be here with you today.
Oh, the honor is all ours, man. Vincent, just to start us off, take us back to the beginning. Where did the idea come from for this show, A Beautiful Bond?
Well, in some sense, the show was born when I was born. See, I'm a Nuyorican. My life as a Nuyorican artist and my life's work as an educator over the last few decades has in many ways been about nurturing the connections between Black and Latinx communities. So the impetus created this show like this has been stewing for a long time. That said, something happened around 2020 when we first set forth in this project. At the time, we had endured 4 years where race-based and anti-immigration hate was escalating in this country, as we all well know. This tension provoked a kind of polarity in our culture that I was noticing, and that was really unsettling to me. On the one side of the coin, during that time, people of color, particularly Latinx and Black people, were enacting really beautiful acts of solidarity and intersectionalism that was nothing short of inspiring. But there was an unsettling undercurrent that I was also seeing. Rumblings coming from both inside and outside of our communities that seemed to want to pit Latinx and Black people against each other to incite division. Right. This was really troubling to me, and because it seemed that some folks were buying into that division and forgetting our shared history, as an artist, I wanted to do something about it. Because the fact is that since the beginning of the colonization of the Americas and the inception of the slave trade, the diasporic people of Africa and Latin America have been living, learning, and growing together. For centuries, we've had shared geographies, exchanged cultural knowledge, and linked arms in resistance to an oppressor that wore many masks but has the same face underneath. As artists, we felt compelled to create something that will remind people of these connections and help people envision a way forward together. This is, in fact, the function of art, right? So I'd been thinking about all of this for a long time, but there were some other more concrete elements that came into view as I was working on the show. One was really a moment that happened years before all this while I was watching the documentary Soul Power. You know the documentary?
I know it like the back of my hand.
Oh, it's such a beautiful documentary, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you remember, early on in the film, there's this really, really beautiful scene where Celia Cruz and the Fania All-Stars are holding a jam session with B.B. King and members of the Spinners and James Brown Band on a plane,
on an airplane,
headed to Zaire. They're 10,000 feet up in the sky jamming, and they're on the way to Africa. But the thing about the documentary is it's capturing this concert, this festival that was supposed to happen before the George Foreman Muhammad Ali fight. And the idea was to bring Latinx, African American, and African musicians together for the first time. Right. Yeah. It was really an artistic and cultural act of solidarity that we were seeing. When I saw that scene, the artist in me knew then I wanted to create something that felt just like that, using my own mediums, poetry and performance. Now, sometime after that, I was working on my first 2 books, which are all about Latinx and Caribbean identity. And I had come across letters that Martin Luther King and Cesar Chavez had written to each other, right? Including a eulogy that Chavez wrote for Dr. King. There was an alliance between the two of them that is shamefully underrepresented in public discourse. A lot of people don't even know. We know about Dr. King, we know about Cesar Chavez, we don't necessarily know about their alliance and their brotherhood. And so in my own research on Puerto Rican history for these books, I learned of that alliance, and I started to learn more about another one, which is equally important, I think. Now, I come from New York Puerto Ricans who we're all kind of informed and descendants of the young lords, right?
Yes.
And I didn't know as much, though, about the relationship that the Young Lords had with the Black Panthers, right? So Chacha Jimenez from Chicago, who's founded the Young Lords, had actually been forming a partnership with Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers. Have you seen Judas and the Black Messiah?
Indeed.
There's a scene in that movie where they actually show that alliance being formed. It's brief. If you blink, you miss it. But I was really glad to see it represented in the film. So these three moments sent me on a really hungry artistic search to find more historical moments of Black-Brown unity and exchange. And that led me to Paul Ortiz's amazing book, An African American and Latinx History of the U.S. So I had already been trying to figure out how to shape these connections into a body of art when I was commissioned by NJPAC and Rutgers to curate a jazz poetry event in tandem with the performance of your jazz suite, The Movement Revisited, which I have to say, it's a really remarkable, a truly beautiful piece of music.
Thank you, sir.
I remember listening to it at home, planning, prepping for all this, and really being struck by the beauty and power of the music, but the relationship between the music and the speeches by these iconic civil rights leaders. And as I was listening to the speeches, there's that artist and scholar in me that kept thinking about, well, what's outside the frame? Yeah. And I did start to think about the fact that at the same time, the Latinx, the Chicano movement was really gaining steam. And again, these communities and these movements were working hand in hand. And so I think that's where the impetus really came to find a space to honor the artists and poets from those two communities and bring together some of the current musicians and poets from our communities to celebrate and honor that in one singular space.
Oh, Vincent, this is so amazing and just so powerful. Everything you just broke down was just has so much feeling and history. And, I really hope that everyone watching this program tonight is going to go out and buy all of these books, see these documentaries, and really do the homework on how together we are. And the poets and musicians that we're going to hear tonight are Willie Perdomo, John Murillo, Aracelis, Girmay, Mahogany L. Browne, and of course yourself, accompanied by NEA jazz master, bassist Reggie Workman, pianist Sullivan Fortner, and drummer Nasheet Waits to accompany our poets. The first piece we have here is an instrumental called Variations of Three by Reggie Workman, which is fitting because our program tonight is organized into 3 sections, right?
Yeah, that's right. If you'll let me Latin nerd out for a second, I think it's also fitting because it evokes the eclecticism and search for harmony of the 3 identities in question: Black, Latinx, and American.
Well, right on. So with that, let's listen to our first number by Reggie Workman and Sullivan Fortner and Nasheet Waits. This is Variations of Three. Now that was a great way to set the tone for our first poetry segment. So Vincent, can you tell us a little about who we're going to hear from now? And can you share with us how you conceive of this first section? I mean, what's the unifying theme?
Well, every opening needs proper stage setting, right? So these three pieces set the stage by establishing the vibe and introducing the themes of the show. So kicking things off is New York State poet Willie Perdomo performing Forget What You Saw, followed by Aracelis Girmay with her piece As a Child I Wrote My Name, and closing with Dolores Maybe by John Murillo. Now, for one, Willie, Aracelis, and John are all Afro-Latinx people, so they are the living embodiment of Black-Brown unity. The poems they present in this first section are the flint for dialogue concerning issues of identity and history that Black and Brown folks contend with. These poems are about beginnings, questioning the official story, and seeking rebirth or renewal. So conceptually, I was thinking about our beginnings, or our re-beginnings, to use a term coined by Edward Glissant that Aracelis uses in her poem. So I turned to that exchange between Dr. King and Cesar Chavez that I mentioned before. For context, in March 1966, Cesar Chavez led the historic strike for the rights of Mexican and Filipino farm workers with a 340-mile march from Delano to Sacramento. This was the march where the rally cry, "Si se puede," yes we can, was made famous. Impressed by this work to defend the rights of the poor and people of color, Dr. Martin Luther King wrote to Chavez, saying, "The fight for equality must be fought on many fronts, in the urban slums, in the sweatshops of the factories and fields. Our separate struggles are really one, a struggle for freedom, for dignity, and for humanity. You and your fellow workers have demonstrated your commitment to righting grievous wrongs forced upon exploited people. We are together with you in spirit and in determination that our dreams for a better tomorrow will be realized." Now that letter feels like a seed to me, the spark for something beautiful. And you'll hear an echo of that in the second poem by Aracelis, where she plants a dream to take root.
Wow, now that's a beautiful setup, Vincent. Thank you very much. And with that, let's hear from Willie, Aracelis, and John for ourselves.
Forget what you saw. You want to see, you're in the whip looking. You want to be seen as you see. You want to be seen and having been seen, never seen again. There's hurt in your eye. It's been there since the Dutch set up shop. You ain't running from nothing, but you ain't chasing nothing either. Looking, as in the best way to watch was the other way. To see before they could say, I saw. You lean to the side and recline, only to see who else is hurting. This is how you decide to gaze these days. Who, this, that, and the third. always looking for something. Light most definitely black. Bite the sky off it, man. Bring some, they said. You talking so much. The shook ones always live in running starts. What block was that again? Who was that you said again? Who you again? Those tales lie best on nights like these. Who try to at least? Yours go bling black. Blacker, blacker. Brains split and spilling. Spilling, spilling. Your oral history, a constant bomb for the last walk-in and testament. Hunger, all teeth, no showtime to eat. Apart from money, what did we spend? The starting line ends here, in the land of ballers and shot callers, the land of Cuban links and chocofang. Sink as far bottom as you can, you decide. But why always? Why always, always, why? Always, everything got to be about love. Just wondering, God, it's true. You could be a lot of things given everything that's out there. Forget what you saw. People who know this for sure are very suspicious of this nothing. Blood is always looking for a subject. A little something about the beginning before it starts. The attempt to find yourself at off-peak hours. No images would be perfect for this chill in the cut. Swear to God, and kaboom. Bodies fall faster than stock prices. Seen more than the time it takes to forget. The thing is, though, not to stay behind and take the life that was taken from you.
Harriet Jacobs said, God breath. Edouard Glissant said, re-beginning. Lucille Clifton said, some good news about the earth. As a child, I wrote my name into the back of the borrowed book. After you, Rosa, Missy, Queen, Vincent, Agustin. It was almost invisible, the small word exile floating above all our names. We sat in rows of desks cut from trees. The history teacher said, our fathers came. Our fathers found, our founding fathers. All our salt detonating inside us. We followed someone through the sentence into this sorrow. It was ours. But so were the ballpoint Noche Buena flowers Zuli drew inside the windows of our cursive names. Before long, we were saying each other's words in the kitchen and at school. Sometimes we were fighting each other for scraps. Also, you were sometimes telling me story of your mountain, what the crow could say, telling me the story of rain and mango falling down your grandmother's roof. In my kitchen is a stone. You have one too? And our mother said this and that in the yard, exchanging this wheel of bread, this leaf to tea. We call this plant for death, we call this plant for baby. So I walk in the sentence of the ones who know that they will die. We walk together in circles, sometimes hearing Harriet's God breath in us, knowing we are not God. We know what we've been robbed of, and what we do not know we build an altar to, unfolding our arms in music on the street. Like you, I know to always be looking for my family. I wave to her in the horse's face. I bow to the sign. Did you always want a sentence small as a doorway that only you and yours could see, nobody follow? For my uncle, for my grandfather, I scanned the faces of men up early on the roadside looking for work. With the babies drinking from me, I tried to get my head right with dirt to flour. I tried to hear the bembe bell. I made a black X on the ground and left my sentence a little open like you taught me, and then I flew. I learned some of the syllables of the water. I could see who was my brother, my sister down there. I could say what it was my heart wanted. I could begin really to know what I was made of. I know who is fire I have seen. I know who is the beetle. Cousin, you in the room of this time with me. I believe we carry tatter, some piece of us. I remember it was in the dark back room of the Botanica where Mom finally found the cat's claw. So strengthen her bones, so help me read, so teach me see. Malaika tells the children, walk a circle in the house and be alert and care for everything inside it. My mother swept the street. My great-grandfather fed the pigeons his bread. We are at home on the earth. My brother leaves joras made of sand all over the city of Long Beach. When I hear you laughing, or your songs come through the next door screen with the pho and greens and sancocho and all our sleeping in the apartment rows one by one, sharing walls, all that dream and pain and names commingling in the air. You are telling me earth. We are talking the milk that is green. What listening can we re-begin? What words che-che with other sounds inside? That sound you were making, it has my mother in it. That sound you were making, it has my mother in it. Could you tell me some good news about the earth? There was a time it was my home. Could you tell me some good news about the earth? There was a time it was my home. I bury my dream into the sentence so it can root. And the underground flickers with the messages between.
I've never spoken to anyone about this until now, until you. I slept once in the field beyond the riverbank, a flock of nightjars watching over me. That was the summer a farmer found his daughter hanging in the hayloft and wished for the first time he had not touched her so. I wish I could say we were close, the girl and I mean, but only knew her to wave hello and walked her once halfway up the road before turning finally into my grandmother's yard. This was Ontario, California, 1983, which is to say there was no river, and I wouldn't know a nightjar if it bit me. But the girl was real, and the day they found her, that was real. And the dress she wore, same as on our walk, periwinkle she called it. I called it blue. Blue with bright yellow flowers all over. The dress and the flowers, they too were real. And on our walk, I remember we cut through the rail yard and came upon a dead coyote lying near the tracks, a frail and dusty heap of regret. He was companion to no one. Stone still, staring, our shadows stretched long and covering the animal. She told me something I want to say about loneliness, something I've since forgotten, the way I've forgotten, though I can see her face as if she were standing right here, her very name. Let's call her Dolores, from dolor, Spanish for anguish. And whatever the sky, however lovely that afternoon, I remember mostly the wind. How a breeze unraveled what was left of a braid, and when I tried to brush from Dolores' brow a few loose strands, how she flinched, how she ran the rest of the way home, how I never saw her after that except when they carried her from the barn. Her periwinkle dress, her blue legs and arms, and the fields ablaze with daisies. I spent the rest of that summer in the rail yard with my dead coyote, watching trains loaded and leaving. All summer long, I'd pelt him with stones. All summer long, I'd use the stones to spell the girl's name. Dolores, maybe, in the dirt. All summer long, fire ants crawled over and between each letter. Her name now, its own small town. A season of heat and heavy rains washed my coyote to nothing. Only teeth and a few stubborn bones that refuse finally to go down. Weeks into autumn, someone found the father hanged from the same groaning tie beams. The hayloft black with bottleflies. But that was 1983. Ontario, California, which is to say, the bottleflies are dead. So too the ants, and neither field nor barn is where I left it. I've never spoken to anyone about this. Until now, until you. I gathered a handful of my coyote's bones, his teeth, and strung them all on fishing wire. A talisman to ward off anguish. A talisman I hold out to you now. Please, come closer. Take this from my hand.
You've just heard poetry from Willie Perdomo, Aracelis Girmay, and just now, John Murillo's piece, Dolores Maybe. As Afro-Latinx poets, the work of Perdomo, Girmay, and Murillo exemplifies Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality by illustrating how issues of race, class, and gender impact the lives of Black and Latinx people by offering the stories of those who are both Black and Latinx. Earlier, Vincent shared with you a letter that Dr. King wrote to Cesar Chavez expressing solidarity and affinity. Let's take a moment to hear what Chavez had to say about their alliance. On the 10th anniversary of his death, Cesar Chavez wrote an homage to Dr. King in Maryknoll magazine. In this heartfelt piece, Chavez says of Dr. King, "It has been our experience that few men or women ever have the opportunity to know the true satisfaction that comes with giving one's life totally in the nonviolent struggle for justice. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of these unique servants, and from him we learned many of the lessons that have guided us. For these lessons and for his sacrifice for the poor and oppressed, Dr. King's memory will be cherished in the hearts of the farm workers forever." As Dr. King and Chavez openly expressed their admiration in a call and response across letters and time, the Black and Latinx poets and musicians presented here are using their artistic craft to speak to and listen to each other in an act of mutual respect and admiration. This exchange represents what this show and its title, A Beautiful Bond, is hoping to accomplish. Now, Vincent, could you share a little bit about why this show was given this title?
Absolutely. So, well, I found the title in the book that I mentioned before, Paul Ortiz's An African American and Latinx History of the United States. In the book, Ortiz references Jose Morelos, who in the 1800s was an abolitionist and leader in Mexico's independence movement. Murillo used the term "a beautiful bond" to describe his vision for a future in the Americas, where the US and Mexico and the rest of Latin America could exist in harmony. It was a call to action, I think, to encourage us to build and nurture that bond, to repair old bridges and build new ones. This show is about using art to echo that call, by having Black and Latinx artists work together and play across cultures and across art forms, poetry and jazz in our situation here, together to create and perform something new.
Now, before we jump into something new with the next round of poems, we have for you a musical interlude written by our drummer Nasheet Waits called Kush.
So I think this is a great opportunity to think about the jazz part of our jazz and poetry show, right? So Christian, is there something about this song and this performance that you can tell us or lend some insight to?
Yeah, well, I actually know this song pretty well because I recorded this with Nasheet on one of my earlier records. But this version that they play here with the great Reggie Workman and Sullivan Fortner, I might go as far as to say they sound a lot better than I did when I played it.
Oh, come on.
Well, you judge for yourself. Here's Sullivan Fortner, Reggie Workman playing Nasheet Waits' masterpiece, Kush. All right, that was Kush by Nasheet Waits, performed by Nasheet, the great Reggie Workman, and Sullivan Fortner. Now we're about to get back into some poetry. But before we do, Vince, can you tell us about this second round of poems?
Yeah, sure. So we've been focused on the historical connections between Black and Latinx folks, right? Now we're going to celebrate and elevate our artistic bridges. See, the Black and Latinx poetic legacies are both rooted in the griot, oral tradition, spoken word, and slam. This next group of poems are drawing from these shared poetic legacies that reach back for centuries. And as you know, probably better than me, we've been making music together for just as long. To offer a few historical examples though, Dizzy Gillespie went to Cuba and heard Chano Pozo, and it inspired him so much that he invited Chano to play in his band, a band that seeded Latin jazz. There's also one of my personal favorites, Carlos Santana. Santana was at the forefront, though he wasn't alone, infusing Latin rhythms with rock and roll. And as we know, rock's founders were Black. And hip hop from the very beginning was a collaboration between Black and brown kids from the Bronx. It was forged by early groups like the Cold Crush Brothers and the Rocksteady Crew. Both groups were a mix of African American and Latinx members. And one of the primary influences that hip hop is built on is the Caribbean Latinx musical form known as bomba. See, Black and Latinx people helped to create and forward several musical genres together, including hip hop, Latin jazz, as well as boogaloo, soul, disco, house, and reggaeton, to name a few. Looking at those genres, you can tell we have another thing in common though. We love to dance.
You know it. Now, the musicians that we have joining us for the program this evening, Sullivan Fortner on piano, Nasheet Waits on drums, and the great Reggie Workman on bass. These are some of the most creative, most intuitive musicians that I could think of, and I feel that they were perfect choices for tonight's program. They're very well versed in poetry, in Black and brown history, and it was just a thrill to have them as part of tonight's program. Now, Vincent, in this next block, we also get to see you do your thing with a poem called Ofrenda for Basquiat.
Yeah. Ofrenda for Basquiat. It celebrates the life, work, and vision of Afro-Puerto Rican multidisciplinary artist Jean-Michel Basquiat. Now, people forget that Basquiat was also a musician who led an experimental band called Gray. This is a sound poem that experiments with language in the way that Basquiat experimented with disparate elements in his paintings and dissonant noise in his music. It's also, though, a response to how the white art world treated him and his work. I remember going to an exhibit of his work where the gallery described his paintings as the essence of anger, completely ignoring the vast, layered, historically informed nature of his art that was overtly anti-racist and decolonial before those words were even academic catchphrases. So my poem seeks to transmit those aspects of his legacy on the page and through sound.
Well, that's got me very excited to hear it. So let's get right back into it, shall we?
An ofrenda for Jean-Michel Basquiat. Comes the point. The splicing of rubber teeth with polymer kings becomes chiasma. Becomes collision of ink and light so bright, you got to gaze into the phrase until that splash of black beige summons 20/20 blindness to uplift the tatted congregation. Comes the point, the blushing of the dust heads, the erudite vulgarity of copyrighted deities snaps like subtitles transcribing this boom for real like a spit-shined amen. Comes the point, the work just stinks of wow. Each fleck and shake of the brush baked in the glint of how. Why, what? Where the geography scrolled out inside the skull is more expansive than the low-rent studio where it sleeps. Comes the point where what is scratched onto plaster in blood orange wafts like onion gum, where wicker wings can't hold optic nerves, can't hold obnoxious fumes, where yellow oil cans can't spill quickly enough to prevent asbestos and niacin from gentrifying flipped medullas. Soon, the self-portrait is a landscape of how? What? How? Why? How? Soon, the mask becomes more real than the face, where irradiated fortunes glistened, bent in blotted blue chasms of pocked, pollinated phrenia, where the neoteny of sly primates conceals the confabulations of the fashion mongers among us. Comes the point how sausage fame oxidizes the lathe of corpses, colossums, collapses, and the room just stinks of wow. And the reverb you can't see is mistaken for an other, where when, why, the color of this cosmology is shipped to the funny farm to shed the chromatic singularity of Zumbi and Zeus. Comes the point how the magic of the marker is confiscated, is conflated as unadulterated anger, and soon the suture ruptures the point. The paint thrashes the curator's lips, where the xenochrony of mauve and alabaster just stinks of wow. And the dearly deep-arted peel off the walls to confound the flatlanders looking for a sound investment. And the same old hangs the old shames out to dry and rot and reek like a canker, like a gree-gree, to ward off sham reflections of this, boom this, for this, chiasma this, splash this, braids this, deities this, subtitles this, shake this, brush this, blood this, yellow this, medulla this, blue this, fame this, colossum this, zoom this, paint this, thrash this, mauve this, walls this, canker this, gree-gree this, boom this, funk this, wow this, blow this, run this, jump this, slide this, down this, why this, how this, stink this.
San Quentin ain't got a skyline to dream about. But my uncle's pride in my ability to recover from an ankle twist on a slab of broken concrete make it seem so. They say I play pickup games like I've been to the pen. I smirk, a double dribble skipping across my mistaken face. 20 years later, a solar system rids of a planet makes itself a new moon to rock the tides. Still, the barbed wire and shotguns work like clock clicks, and my father still don't know how many times I've challenged death. The COVID-19 that spread across my chest, my breathing so close to an island submerged in fluid. I stuttered awake on the 11th night. I wept until the cold medicine carried me back to sleep. The sickness lies, a boundaryless wretch. And it's the most American thing I've ever felt. Secure in my home, and still dying from the heat of capitalism. They are reopening the world. They are reopening the world. They are reopening the world after the planet tried to reset itself. And the prisons are still packed with people afraid to believe in redemption. Recent adjacent smiles. Forgive white-collar crimes as hedge funds funnel into protective custody. A static of dispatch. The walls clean with other men's teeth. Antibody tests smell like Henrietta Lacks, coming back to remind us of what happens when you trust a house of poachers and they call us ungovernable. The way we picket and protest. This morning is a reminder. Steel bars don't melt with silence. The people behind bars are captives of war. The people behind bars are captives of war. The people stolen into camps and cages speak it plain. I want to go home. I want to hold my daughter. I want to see my mother one last time. There ain't no poem in that. The human form was not meant to be locked up, locked down, cage bound. Consider your own bones, the way it lengthens as soon as you turn your face to the sun, a mask over your nose, relinquishing itself to this adaptation of love. Inhale, inhale, inhale the day, crisp in its welcome. Send a kite to Folsom as we correct our form.
Crips, Bloods, and butterflies. A sunflower somehow planted in the alley, its broken neck. Maybe memory is all the home you get, and rage where you first learn how fragile the axis upon which everything tilts. But to say you've come to terms with a city that's never loved you might be overstating things a bit. All you know is there was once a walk-up where now sits a lot vacant, and wraps in deep grass hide themselves from the day. That one apartment fire set back in '76, one the streets called arson to collect a claim, could not do, ultimately, what the city itself did, left to its own dank devices some 16 years later. Rebellions, said some. Riots, said the rest. Rebellions, said some. Riots, said the rest. In any case, flames. And the home you knew, ash. It's not an actual memory, but you remember it still. A rust-bottomed Datsun, handed down, then stolen, stripped, recovered, and built back from boats, driving away in May 1992. What's left of that life quivers in the rear view, the world on fire, and half your head with it.
Head crack, head crack. Zubang, Olan, Brick City, Fly Diddy, Drug War, Street Noir, War Fat, Bank That, Sneaker Box, Check Account, Get Fresh, Stay Fly, Night Pool, Old School, Stash House, Corner Store, We Cool, No More, Smoked Out, Players Ball, Okie Doke, Flat Broke, Hangout, No Doubt, Blackout, Death Count, Dwight gone, Tone gone, Petey gone, Chino gone, Body Shot, Chop Shop, Black Hole, Mid Soul, Break That, Like This, Black Cat, Death Kiss, Paw Move, Move That, Crush Groove, Dope Shit, Step Back, Get This.
In that last segment, you got to hear my fellow curator, the incredible Vincent Toro, along with Mahogany L. Browne, John Murillo, and Willie Perdomo, all rocking the mic with poems that evoke the Latinx and Black poetic traditions of slam, spoken word, and hip-hop poetry. We're about to get into the last round of poems, and Vincent, I have to say, this third section is really powerful. I feel a distinct tonal shift in this last segment. Was that done on purpose?
It was absolutely done on purpose. I think, let me just explain the poems. I think it'll set the stage for you. It opens with another poem from Aracelis Girmay. Now, Aracelis is both Puerto Rican and Eritrean, and her book, The Black Maria, is a work of art that enacts a kind of bridge building between the poet's two racial and ethnic histories. It's a gorgeous collection that really captures the spirit of everything we're aiming for with this show. I follow that with my second poem, the one that I wrote specifically for this project, and it's called Bricolage and Abrazo. I call this poem a miniature epic that offers a condensed history of Black Latinx collaboration and exchange. Its opening line echoes a line from Caribbean poet Kamal Brathwaite in a poem that he wrote for Cuban poet Nicolás Guillen. Another example of exchange between Black and Latinx folks, where we have a Black Caribbean poet writing in dedication to a Cuban poet who has inspired him. So the line that I'm referring to in the poem is, "And the sea between us yields its secrets." Finally, we close the show with the one and only Mahogany Browne reading her poem, This is the Honey. Part of the brilliance of Mahogany's poem, and her larger body of work actually, is in how she's able to shine a light and project a way forward in the midst of struggle. And really, the last two lines of the poem just seem like the best way to end the show. But I'm not going to quote them now. You'll have to wait for it, gente.
All right then. Let's let these last poems take us home and into a better Black-Brown future. Here is Aracelis Girmay with an excerpt from The Black Maria.
Somewhere, I got the idea. Somewhere I got the idea to keep them separate. Somewhere I got the idea to keep them separate, this story from that one. Somewhere I got the idea to keep them separate, this story from that one, these stars from those. Somewhere I got the idea to keep them separate, this story from that one, these stars from those, the history of this sea from somewhere. I got the idea to keep them separate, this story from that one, these stars from those, the history of this sea from the history of that sea. Separating the body into territories of another sense, while overhead the sky marked by light is read by someone else's mind. But the angles I trace abide by different sight and hover up not as bears or sisters, but a root dense with fires, dark time adorned by the messages of mirrors saying, you are made with everywhere. Dark time adorned by the messages of mirrors saying, you are made with everywhere.
Bricolage, an abrazo, a history. What sea between us? What salty gust of iron chokers? What sacked gullies could shake us from the ejido stream? A snow-blind stampede rattles this beautiful bond, prods us into a world of walls that leaves us all doubting the strength of this accord, until we abide by edicts that crab barrel us. Flung from Angola as from Cochabamba into a cyclone of lecherous banks, too often we succumbed to the filthy fiction that we were clashing melodies, when in fact we are two wings of the same dove, wings that double as a bridge of light, light of silver, and the azúcar that we were bullied to pan and mill for the same mugger. Juntamente, we turned that calamity into feast and song, built this bridge over the rotting wreckage of caravels deployed to dismember us. We laid the foundation into barrier reefs off the Keys and glaciers at Ushuaia. Those vessels docked aquí y allá, incited the blend, the bustle, the tango and the hustle we cut hand in hand at the Palladium. We riveted its hinges with Bolivar's revelation that liberation cannot come for one tribe and not another. He knew it like Dr. King knew it when he pledged brotherhood to Cesar Chavez, like Toussaint knew it, like Martí knew it as he lauded Ida B. Wells' pen. They knew we were not two cleft, but one bass clef humming perdido, weaving Juan Tisol's trombone with the Duke's keys of oro. This chorus of hues hewed the arches like Brathwaite's praise of Nicolas Guillan, like June Jordan's screams for justicia in Guatemala and Nicaragua. The abutment set into place with the high five shared by Lamont Sanford and Julio Fuentes. Cutwaters carved out of Jane Cortez laments for Ana Mendieta and Bob Kaufman's seances to summon Garcia Lorca. It's roved paved in Robert Hayden's Odes to Mexico City, where Langston Hughes made love with Xavier Villaturia. The arches gilded in sequins of Cardi B and Megan Thee, making the world blush in unison. Took us 5 centuries to mount this prismatic puente, stretching from Lagos to San Juan to Santiago to Oakland, a pact sealed by the act of a rapper adopting the name of an Incan chief who took an African bride that fought beside him to expel the conquistadors. By Fania, jamming with the spinners on a plane to Zaire. By Diz offering Chano Pozo a seat in his orchestra. By the Rocksteady crew setting off syncopated boomerangs. Their lockstep poppin' is the bridge. The Chicago Defender defending El Malcriado is the bridge that was the Underground Railroad that rolled south to Matamoros. This bridge of wings and light is the glue, the counterweight to black lynchings in Mississippi and brown lynchings in El Paso. This bridge of onyx and bronze is Obama riding Dolores Huerta, si se puede, all the way to the Oval Office. It's Ayana and AOC patrolling the Capitol Hall, shoulder to shoulder. It's Chuck D railing against SB 1070, Cuban troops aiding Mandela, and black soldiers fighting beside Sandino. It's El Clamor clamoring about the ills of Dred Scott. It's linked palms throwing down machete and plow to entwine and emerge from cane and mine to stall all engines of plunder. Become the copper, pluck the stinger off this wasp. So I ask again, what sea between us? Our ghost, our kin. They spun us this tablecloth from the weasel's missteps, showed us Kamasi's creed that there is no harmony without difference. Their shared blood is our compass. The matching berets of Chacha Jimenez and Fred Hampton are the lighthouse leading us back to Chapultepec, that we might flip this bridge over, turn it into a table where as eternal compañeros we cook the feast to sustain our descendants as they work to fashion a world where all worlds fit.
There is no room on this planet for anything less than a miracle. We gather here today to revel in the rebellion of a silent tongue. Every day, we lean forward into the light of our brightest designs and cherish the sun. Praise our hands and throats. Praise our hands and throats, each incantation, a jubilee of a people dreaming wildly. Despite the dirt beneath our feet, or the wind pushing against our greatest efforts, soil creates things. Art births change. This is the honey. And doesn't it taste like a promise? Where your heart is an accordion and our laughter is a soundtrack. Friend, dance to this good song. Look how it holds our names. Each bone of our flesh home sings welcome. Oh, look at the gods dancing as the rain rains against a steely skyline, where our grandparents sit on the porch and nod at the spectacle in awe of the perfection that is their grandchildren's faces, each small discovery unearthed in its own outpour. Tomorrow, our daughters will travel the world with these poems. And our sons will design cities against the backdrops of living museums. Yes, yes, our children will spin chalk until each equation bursts a familial tree, rooted in miraculous possibilities and alive. 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 Alive.
That was Mahogany L. Browne performing This Is the Honey, rooted in miraculous possibilities and alive. Whew. Yes, indeed. What a marvelous way to bring the show to a close. But before we go, we like to share just one more quote with you that emphasizes not only the show's theme, but also why we felt it was so important to build a show around it. This one comes from the legendary activist Angela Davis. Davis, in an interview with Citizens for Immigrants, explains why she, as an African American woman, was out on the front lines fighting for the rights of Latinx immigrants. She said, "It is a cause that Black people should embrace. One of the things that we need to remember is that the victories that have been won in the struggle for Black freedom never would have been possible if only Black people were the ones who were active in those struggles. I know my case would not have been won, as it was, had it not been for the activism of the Chicano community in San Jose when I was tried on charges of conspiracy." In San Jose, there was a very minuscule Black community there at that time, and it was in the Chicano community that the major organizing took place. I don't understand how people can assume that it's possible for each racialized ethnic group to go it alone. As people who have benefited from these freedom struggles, it is our responsibility to continue justice, as Martin Luther King Jr. pointed out, is indivisible, and justice for Black people must be used on behalf of justice for Latinos and justice for immigrants and justice for undocumented immigrants. Just a little something to leave you as we end this program. Here's to another 500 years of Black-Brown unity. With that, I'd like to say thank you to my fellow curator, Vincent Toro, and to all of our poets, Aracelis, Girmay, John Murillo, Mahogany L. Browne, and Willie Perdomo.
Y mil gracias to you, Christian McBride, as well as to our stellar trio, Reggie Workman, Nasheed Waits, and Sullivan Fortner. Special thanks to our partners, Rutgers University Newark, my alma mater, with a special shout out to Rigoberto Gonzalez and to the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, the TG Charitable Foundation, and women at NJPAC for their support.
Please check out our archive of virtual programs and upcoming live events at njpac.org/cityversus. Good night.
Good night and pa'lante.